Welcome to the Earning Freedom Program. This is back. We're back again with another episode. Today we're talking about accountability. That is the next lesson in our program. You know, we started off with values. We went to goals. We went to the importance of having a 100% commitment, which is the right attitude. We spoke about aspiration, about seeing yourself as something more than what you are. We spoke about taking action. And now we are talking about accountability metrics. That's the next A in the Straight A Guide. Now, in our previous video, you heard from my friend Rodney White, who gave us a little bit of an introduction to the importance of accountability metrics at the end of his interview. I recall Rodney speaking about how he focused on really making better decisions during his last couple of years of imprisonment than he made during the first decade, because he knew that he was behind the game. He was behind the eight ball. He knew that he was getting out of prison and he didn't have any place to go. So it became very important for him to really accelerate and start making progress. And I know that he went forward and completed life skills programs and other training programs inside of the prison system. And then he got out, and I know that he went to community college, and then he went to get his undergraduate degree, and he got his master's degree. And it was all that work, that little bit of work that allowed him to become the successful man that he eventually became. And so what I try and learn from a message like that is he didn't go from where he was, a prisoner, into the successful person that he is today as a homeowner, as a leader in the community. He took a series of incremental steps, action steps that we spoke about, and he held himself accountable. We heard the same thing from Michael Justice, the fellow who did 20 years in the state prison system in Florida. Once he turned his life around, he began taking these incremental action steps and holding himself accountable. And it was that little step-by-step approach that allowed him to become the success that he eventually became. I gotta say, it's really important for me to communicate this message to people in prison and to people that I work with that come out of prison out here. Because sometimes we don't realize how we go from becoming where we are today to what we want to be tomorrow, or what we see ourselves as. I remember interviewing a guy when I was at the end of my sentence, and we were talking about what type of work he wanted to do when he got out of prison. And this was a guy that had been, involved in a high-level crime for a long period of time, and he's never had a job. And he told me that he was going to need to earn $50,000 a month in order to function. He said, I got to find a job that's going to pay me at least $50,000 a month, because that's what it takes me to live out here. Well, the reality is there are very few people that can make that kind of money. And I'm not saying that any of you can't make that kind of money. I can tell you that I know a lot of people that make that kind of money. I'm on a path sometimes where I can make that kind of money. But it didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of small steps along the way. And those steps only get made when we hold ourselves accountable. We've got to create our own accountability metrics in order to make sure that we're always on track, that we're always making progress, that we don't got to wait for somebody else to determine whether we are being successful. We can tell by our own decisions, by the things that we are doing. And it's really important to communicate that message that nobody should be making more accountability metrics for your life than yourself. This is not to get a lower bunk. This is not to get an extra bowl of Wheaties. This is not to get out of prison even. It is rather changing the way that your mind works so that you can stay focused on what it is you need to achieve, what it is that you need to do in order to get to become the person that you want to become, to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. As I've mentioned frequently, part of my passion is to try and improve the outcomes of the criminal justice system. And how do I do that? There's like 1,000 steps along the way that have to be done before I can generate the type of influence that I'm going to need to persuade a legislator to change the law that will bring back parole, or that will reduce sentences, or that will create mechanisms for people in prison to come out. I mean, we've got to realize that's really important, that there are a lot of steps that get taken. I'm not saying that any one step is more important or less important than another. What I am saying is that you've got to have a very clear path. You've got to have a very clear path, and every step that we take has to have some type of relationship to what it is we're trying to achieve. At least that's the strategy that has worked for me. That's the strategy that I learned from masterminds, is that if I can see where it is I'm trying to go, then my job is to close the gaps, right? That will take me from where I am to where I want to go. And that's your job as well, to close the gaps with what? With action steps, but action steps that are taken on purpose, that are taken with a deliberate sense of success or failure. And it's okay to fail. What's not okay is to stop trying. What's not okay is to say, it's not my fault. You got to be somebody that's filled with ideas, and you got to be trying something every single day if you want to change the outcome of your life. I want to change the outcome not only of my life, but I want to change the outcome of our nation's criminal justice system. I want to change the way employers look at people who are coming out of prison. I want to change the way that banks look at people who are coming out of prison. Because a lot of them don't want to give credit. So my job is to say, okay, I don't got to think about what I want. I got to think, well, what is the objection that I face with employers? What is the objection I face with bankers or creditors? What is the objection that I face with legislators? What is the objection I face with prison administrators, right? If I can understand how all of those people are thinking, then I can start creating a mechanism that will get them there, that will get me there, or make a more powerful and persuasive argument to change the game. That's why I'm always asking for your help. I'm asking you to help me, because I create these courses out here with the idea is it's going to make it easier for me to make things better in there. If my objective is to improve the outcomes of the criminal justice system so that fewer people are serving multiple decades, well then I got to say, yeah, I'd love to see that change made. But what I want isn't really relevant. What do employers want? What do legislators want? What do tax-paying citizens want? What do creditors want? If I can figure out all of that, then I can say, okay, let me create a mechanism that's going to help me get there. And that's what this course is about. That's what accountability metrics are about. I can tell you, I've told you before, I started a new website. It's called jobsandresourcesforfelons.com. And on that site, I have a little section. I'm gonna flash a little bit of it during this video. I'm gonna figure out how I can do that, but I'll flash a picture of it, of what it looks like. Okay? But out here in society, when I go and speak, I like to pull that website up and throw it up on a screen. And when I throw it up on a screen, I like to point and see, these are the people who are locked in prisons across America. And these are the people who are working really hard to come back to society as a law-abiding, contributing citizen. Why? Why do I want to do that? Because I know that if I can get 1,000 of those names, 1,000 people who are doing something, by answering the questions like the ones that flash up at the end of this screen, if I can show them that, well, then I believe it's going to be more persuasive when I say, this is why we need reforms in our system. Because if we get more people pursuing this path of leading a values-based, goal-oriented adjustment, then legislators are going to recognize, well, maybe it does make sense for people who are working hard to do what? To earn freedom. People that are doing that don't need to be locked up. And maybe administrators will say, well, maybe there is a pathway to get them from a segregated housing unit into a general population, into a lower security prison. As my man Rodney said, because why? Because when you get to lower security prisons, you find that there may be more programs available. There may be less stress and less tension. And to the extent that you can improve your environment, you're taking a step. You're taking an accountability metric. And sometimes it's hard to see inside, when you're locked inside of that prison, sometimes it's hard to see, why am I doing this? It doesn't matter. I got multiple decades. Or as he said, I've got Buck Rogers time. I've got so much time, nothing matters. But nothing could be further from the truth. I know this from personal experience of going through 26 years in prison. You see, I didn't get out of jail one day sooner. But the preparations that I made very early on in the sentence helped me open opportunities as I went through the sentence, and then opened enormous opportunities when I came home. It's no different from pathways that I have learned from many, many, many masterminds. If you go back a couple hundred years, I think it was like 400 years ago, there's a guy named Gutenberg. Some of you may have heard the name Gutenberg. In fact, if I were to give a quiz, I'll bet you that a lot of you would know who Gutenberg was. Gutenberg was the inventor of the printing press. And the printing press changed the world because it could convey ideas. Okay? Before the printing press, to write a book took thousands of hours, tens of thousands of hours, because you had to have, generally there were people in monasteries that were writing these pages out, and then they'd have to pass the pages out and write them over and over and over again. It was just inconceivable to convey ideas. But when the printing press came along, people could convey all kinds of ideas much, much faster just by printing, and then people could read. But there's a story in there. When Gutenberg invented the printing press, 96% of the population was illiterate. They couldn't read, right? They couldn't read. So he invented this machine that only 4% of the population could even derive any benefit from. The difference is he prepared his way and then opened opportunities because of it. Same thing with automobile manufacturers, right? I heard the story of Daimler-Benz. I don't know if it was Daimler or the guy from Benz, whoever it was that invented the Mercedes-Benz. When he invented the Mercedes, it was against the law in Germany to drive a car. There were not any roads. There were no gasoline stations. It doesn't seem like the best time to be inventing a car. No roads, no gas stations, and it's against the law. He had to get a special dispensation, permission from the King of Germany to begin driving the car. So he put himself through the work, and the benefits came much later. That's really what we're doing right here. I'm trying to start a movement, and that movement to change the prison system, I got to start really at the ground level by showing you, hey, these are strategies that work. And if I can get you to believe in those strategies and create your accountability metrics so that you can see how you're climbing yourself from where you are to where you want to go in meaningful, measurable steps, and you document those steps, guess what? Not only are you helping yourself, but you are helping me persuade legislators, employers, creditors, administrators, taxpayers on why we need to reform the criminal justice system. It is all part of a circle. We're all part of one community. But I need to get this type of documentation. And that's why I need you to hold yourself accountable. Answer these questions. Take a look at my email address, whether it's you're sending me an invite to michael@prisonprofessor.com or michael@michaelsantos.com. If you just can write your accountability metrics, what steps are you taking today that are going to demonstrate your commitment to living as a law-abiding, tax-paying citizen? If I have one of those, well, first of all, if I have none of those, then I'm faced with this objection. I go out into an audience and I speak and they say, oh yeah, but you're different. Not everybody can do that. I don't believe that at all. I can tell you, I go into some audiences and I face this kind of objection. The people in prison, most of them are never going to amount to anything, and we need to let them know that right away so they don't have unrealistic expectations of what they can do. And, we just need to calm those hopes. That is the worst advice I've ever heard, right? That's like the advice that I heard from the U.S. attorney when I was sentenced. And he said, if Michael Santos spends every day of his life in an all-consuming effort to repay society, And if he lives to be 300 years old, our community will still be at a significant net loss. I'll always remember that sentence because it struck me as being absurd at the time. And it's massively absurd right now because it's the same message that many of you have heard, right? That you're never going to amount to anything. Well, my job is to first of all be the change that I want to see in the world. So I've got to come back and be as more successful than anybody would have thought possible. When I can do that, then legislators give me a new objection. Well, you're different. No, I'm not different. I'm not different. I just learned from masterminds. And my job is to convey what I learned from those masterminds to everybody who's going through this course. And everybody who's going through this course should really embrace this concept of an accountability metric. It's seeing yourself in a manner of saying, I am here right now, but I'm going to get here. I'm going to take another step. And you can apply this accountability metric to every area of your life. You have to just simply measure your progress. You've got to be able to say, I am succeeding in accordance with the plan that I put in place. I wrote that when I started my journey, I said, within 10 years, I'm going to have a university degree, I'm going to have published something, and I'm going to have more than 10 people in my support network. Three very clear goals. Within 10 years, I'm going to do these things. So I knew what steps I had to take, and I had to hold myself accountable for each of those metrics. And then I would invite the world to hold me accountable. Because by doing that, I am removing all doubt. The only thing that's going to exist now is either an excuse or a celebration or an explanation. Sometimes, we fall off track or something happens beyond our control. You can explain it as long as you've got a path. What you can't explain is, not trying. That you can't explain. You've got to be somebody who says, I'm always willing to try. And here is my method to get there. And this is going to be my timeline to succeed. And when I achieve this level, it doesn't mean game over. It means I'm now going to advance to the next level and the next level and the next level. And you see, that is the process of success. You never really get there. Okay? I didn't get there when I said, okay, now I've got my university degrees in prison. Now I've got, 10 people in my support system. Now I have published. That didn't mean I was successful. No, that just put me on a pathway to do something else, and then to do something else, and then to do something else. But all of them have very clear metrics. All of them can show how I am holding myself accountable. And as I do this and I build this record of holding myself accountable, it becomes much easier for me to persuade other people to believe in me. My goal is to build a platform that highlights and profiles successful people in prison. And there were a lot of steps between where I started when I got out of prison. I said this was what I was going to do, and where I am right now, 3.5, 40 months or so later after I got out of prison, right? A lot of little steps. What are they? Well, first I have to write the program, okay? Just with what? Pen and paper, right? I've got to write it out. I got to conceive it. I got to write it out. Then I've got to figure out, okay, now I need the type of equipment that will allow me to convey it. So I got to figure out, okay, how do I get the resources to get that equipment? Then I have to figure out how to use it. So all the steps I'm taking, I'm always doing these accountability metrics. I'm always saying, okay, I'm going to do this by then. And they've got all these awesome tools out here in society. And I got to tell you, they are awesome. And I really wish that I could bring them inside and help you understand how to use them. Because if you could learn how to use the tools that I'm using right now to create programs and so on and so forth, you'll never have to worry about an income or a job, because These types of skills sell themselves, and nobody's asking whether you've got a felony background if you can use desktop publishing software, Adobe software, these types of programs and tools. You can earn a great living, okay? But I can't do that. But I'm learning them, and I have to learn them while I'm simultaneously building my business, while I'm simultaneously satisfying my other responsibilities, while I'm simultaneously trying to sell them. And all of these things, I always use these accountability metric tools. Just yesterday was Sunday. I finished studying a course on this program called InDesign. InDesign, some of you may know what it is. I didn't know what it is before, but it's a computer software program that allows me to create the types of documents that you have this course on. It's called a PDF, right? And I lay it out, first of all, with the different colors and the different fonts, which are the types of the letters, the size of the letters. Lay it all out. First you write it, then I learn to use the program, then I use the program to create it, then I spend time editing it, then I record these videos, then I do all these little steps, but all of them have timelines. When I created this course, I said, okay, I've got 30 days to create the course, to write it, to film every video, to coordinate all of the people that you see in between each other video, to mix it, to put those graphics that you see on the top so that you've got my branded information. Then I put it on the cloud, right, in a computer cloud, and download it onto a thumb drive so that I can distribute it to prisons across the country. All of that is part of a process. And every part of that process, for me, has an accountability metric. I know when I'm going to start it, when I'm going to finish it. If something comes up, and I have to delay that schedule or make an adjustment, not the end of the world, but I'm in charge. I'm always on path to achieve success as I've defined it. That's what I want you to be doing. I want you to begin putting yourself on a path of success. And I want you to understand that it's these incremental action steps that are going to take you from where you are today to where you want to be. You've got to sow these little seeds. Then you've got to nurture the seeds. You've got to put the fertilizer on it. You got to grow through the fertilizer. You got to grow through a lot of manure in order to begin eating fruit. But once you get the fruit, that's not the end of the story. That's just going to put you in a position for a better opportunity tomorrow. Maybe the first step is just learning how to think differently. Maybe the next step is when you learn how to think differently and you learn how to begin positioning yourself to build a record to persuade others that you're different. Then maybe the next step for you, and I don't know who you are, I don't know where you're watching this, but it may be, as it was for me, just getting out of a shoe cell and getting into general population. Then in general population, participating in courses, as Rodney spoke about in the last video, whether it's the BRAVE program or the Challenge program or Life Skills program or the drug program or the GED program, doesn't matter. You're taking a step, and you know that when you finish that step, you've got a start date, you've got a finish date, you've got whether you've applied yourself or whether you've just, went through the motions to get the certificate. But if you apply yourself, you're moving on to the next stage, and the next stage, and the next stage. And eventually you're walking yourself out of prison, or you are persuading somebody to let you out of prison, and then getting a job, and then getting credit, and then finding an investor, and then getting married, and then raising your child. That's life. But we need accountability metrics, and we need to design them ourselves. When I was at the last month of my imprisonment, a friend of mine was climbing Mount Everest, and it was his second time climbing Mount Everest. And I remember I had been a runner for a long time, and I was running a lot in prison, particularly in my last years. But in my last, I got out, I transitioned out in August, and in June, I was probably running 350 miles a month. But I remember saying, in July, I'm going to run 500 miles in the month of August. If this guy can climb Mount Everest, he inspired me. And so I said, if he can climb Mount Everest, I can run 500 miles. I've never run more than 350, maybe 400 miles in a month in prison. I'm going to run 500 miles. And people said, oh, there's no way that you can do that. You can't run 500 miles. Let me just see what that meant. It meant something like 500 divided by 31 equals 16 miles a day, every day, 7 days a week, because I ran every day in prison. That was part of my accountability metric. And I said, I could do that. So, I start doing it, but I'm running like 16 because I'm on an accountability metric. I'm crushing like 18, 20, sometimes 25 miles in a day, right? Because I'm in a camp. In a camp, you got a lot more freedom than you have in the high security. So I'm just running. And I'm thinking, what am I going to do when I get out? How am I going to build my business? How am I going to build my career? But I'm running. And before I know it, I'm like in 8 days, 9 days in, I've already got like 200 miles. And I say, I can make more than that. I can make more than 500. And then I upped it from 500 to 700 miles. And I crushed it. I went through the 700 miles. But why? It's because I had an accountability metric for running. I had an accountability metric for everything. And I held myself accountable. You can hold yourself accountable, whether it's the number of books that you read, whether it is the number of letters that you write, whether it is the number of programs you complete, whether it is the length of time that you go without getting a disciplinary infraction, whether it is how much you save. All of these are steps that you can own and you can control. But to the extent that you say what you're going to do, you write out the plan, and then you hit the goal, and you've announced it to others, and you've invited other people to hold you accountable, that's when you begin to move the needle in life. You know why? Because people start to believe in you. And my hope is that you will do that. Not only will you do that, but you will also write about it. So I'm going to ask you another question. It'll show up here at the end. It stays up on the screen for 3 minutes or so after I finish talking. And it's my hope that you will write your response to that question of an accountability metric that you have designed and that you are using. And then send it to me. Get it to me some kind of way through digitally, because I don't have the resources to handle mail and stuff like that. Send it digitally through email, some kind of way. I've got an intern that looks at my website at michael@michaelsantos.com. And if you put on the subject line the answer of the question, and then you put in the body your name and your contact information and so on and so forth, and then your response to the question, I'm not going to read it. My intern's going to copy and paste it and throw it up on my website at jobsandresourcesforfelons.com. And I challenge you to do that, because if you do that, not only are you going to make a permanent record that you can invite the world to hold you accountable, you're holding yourself accountable. And just like I was able to lift the bar from 500 miles to 700 miles, you will lift the bar. It's all about holding yourself accountable. And I hope you find some value in this message. I got another couple interviews with some interesting guys, but I don't know which one's going to come up first, so I'll refrain from announcing them right now, but you'll see them tomorrow. Thanks so much for giving me your time. Next lesson is on awareness, which is awesome. Be cool. Bye. I hope to hear from you. Thanks.